it does almost feel like those other rumors over the years were fake, like that didn't really happen, because this time it seemed like both guys embraced it. And like I said before, this is probably the time almost where it's the worst time that a Bad Boys 3 could have been made, because we're coming off all this backlash about the original director. Will Smith's copping a lot of backlash at the moment because of how bad Gemini Man was. It's like it probably couldn't have come out at a worse time if for people like to be negative about it, but the positive has been that the film has ended up being so good that people are saying this is Will Smith back at his best. I can't wait to see what he does next. Like, yeah, because on the back of Bright and Gemini Man, there was so much hate being leveled towards Will Smith as well. It's like this film has actually come about at the right time, whereas it could have come across as coming out at the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember that, like, when Bad Boys 1 came out, it's interesting, because the entire trilogy, it's kind of gone throughout the two lead actors, their overall careers. Like, the first one came out when they were both just TV actors.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I wouldn't say nobodies, but not really the names that they became.
Well, the role wasn't meant for Will Smith. It was originally written for Wesley Snipes.
Yeah. A whole lot of people had kind of passed on the role and gone through. But and then when the second movie came out, while the two of them were at the top of their game, and this one, it as you say, it's the kind of thing that people that want to go in this negatively would say, well, both of them, they're has-beens now. Like, Will Smith has had a couple of underperforming films. Martin Lawrence hasn't really had many big films in a long time. So, like, but I was happy that I appreciated that it was a big budget action film, despite those things, that they had the faith in this to make it a big budget action film that was aimed at adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, like too many movies now go for the Avengers or the Fast and Furious, like young teen audience money.
Yeah.
And yeah, we don't really get the huge adult action films that we used to get. Like that's the kind of stuff that ruined Expendables 3 and hurt Die Hard 4 for a lot of people when they decided to we'll ease up on the violence and swearing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We've seen a kind of a move back to the more, like, having a bit more faith that audience is there if you're willing to go for it, with movies like Deadpool and Logan and John Wick 3. So I'm glad that it's kind of it's sparking up again, because it's been a long time since we've really had movies that the studios have had the faith to put a lot of money in when knowing that it's only an adult audience that's going to go see. Because like I mean, this movie, I would say it does seem noticeably cheaper than Bad Boys 2, or at least it feels that way. Like I said, it just, I guess because Michael Bay was huge at the time, Will Smith was huge at the time, Martin Lawrence was huge at the time, so I guess the studio just had a lot more faith and they could put a whole lot more money into it and gave it that real huge epic Michael Bay feel. This one, it does feel a little bit scaled back as far as action scenes, not being really that quite insane level. And like there's a big action car chase in this movie, which happens at night, which I'm thinking might have been maybe to lower the cost of shutting down roads and stuff like that. Which is kind of the same deal when it reflects when they made the first film, they didn't really have a lot of money to make that movie. They had, like, Will Smith, Michael Bay actually had to put a lot of his own money into the film in order to give the movie a huge finale. But, like, that said, the movie doesn't feel cheap. It might feel a bit lesser than the second movie as far as the action scenes and that goes, but it doesn't feel cheap. It still has huge action-packed scenes, and I think the directors, they didn't quite manage to match Michael Bay's early 2000s style 100%. the film isn't completely lacking in flash either. Like sometimes it did feel a little bit like a Fast and Furious movie, with the same kind of music and the same kind of camera work and stuff. Like I guess that's kind of what is just what's kind of standard.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. There were still plenty of moments where this movie kind of shone, like in certain moments during the shootouts, which took me back to the second Bad Boys movie, where they have this. There's this shootout in this in this like building where the camera's like going through walls, and it's just the way that just the stylish way that Michael Bay had made that movie. This does tie into that quite nicely.
Yeah. I guess one of the big questions I have for you, also being a fan of the original, is what did you think of the new characters that they bring into this? Because I find with other franchises that they've rebooted, that's what makes or breaks them, is the new characters that they've brought in. Like, here we've got Will Smith's character working with a whole new team, which of course everyone seems to be referring to the fact now that one of those new team is Vanessa Hudgens, and does she have the right to be in a movie like this because she was in High School Musical and stuff. So what did you think of those new characters that they brought in for Marcus for Marcus and Mike to work with?
I thought they were okay, but I think they were a little underused. It's like this tactical team called Ammo, which I was trying to remember if that was, because that seemed familiar from the second movie. Like, as much as I love the first two movies, I hadn't actually watched them in a while. I'm pretty sure that the tactical team in the second movie was called TNT.
Yeah.
So this one, it's called Ammo, like AMMO, like whatever. I don't even know what that stands for. It's just a cool name to call their team, I guess. And it's they were okay, but whenever I see this kind of thing now, I think of movies like the last Triple X, where Vin Diesel suddenly had this team of nobodies with him. Like, we didn't care about any of them,
yeah.
And I don't know whether this is to take the stress off of the older actors, or whether it's some executive thinking that they need younger actors in a movie if they want to reach a younger audience. I think that's kind of daft, because that kind of team worked in movies like Fast and Furious, like the later Fast and Furious movies. It took at least four movies to set up a team for the fifth Fast and Furious movie. If they just like pulled like all of a sudden in one, you can't just force that stuff all of a sudden in one movie, because really all we really care about is Martin Lawrence and Will Smith.
Yeah.
So they were okay, but I think they were quite underused. So, the techie guy, who's kind of like who you would expect to be a heavy, I thought that was kind of funny, and there was a bit of banter between Will Smith's between Mike and one of the other characters. Like, they just kind of rubbed each other the wrong way at first, and that was I just think maybe it needed a bit more time. I mean, the movie's 2 hours long. The previous movie was 2.5 hours long. I don't know if this film went a little bit longer, whether they would have been able to flesh out those characters a bit more. I mentioned the Triple X movie. It's not nearly as bad as the supporting characters in that film.
Yeah.
But I still think they were a bit underused here. What did you think?
Yeah, I found, like, it was a little bit strange that with the character of Rita, played by Paolo Nunez, it was a little bit strange that as an audience we had to accept that her and Mike had this huge relationship and that she was the one that he should have stayed with. Yeah. It just felt weird because as an audience we'd never seen her before as a character, and I know that they were stressing that 17 years has passed kind of thing. It just felt a little bit forced that as an audience we had to accept that, she was actually the one that he let get away. The other bit in this, I don't know if I'm 100% sure that I liked, or whether or not the writers decided to give him a little bit more character. I really didn't like that Marcus wanted to keep retiring after Mike had been shot, just because like these guys are brothers. If anything, the Marcus that we would have known in the past would have been bloodthirsty to get revenge for what had happened to Mike. Now, I don't know on whether or not the writers actually deliberately meant to do that because they wanted to show that, yeah, Marcus does actually have a little bit of a selfish side where he puts his own family ahead of Mike, or whether they wanted it to be so that, yeah, he does that, but then he feels bad about it, and that's what brings him back. But, yeah, it did feel a little bit strange that, like, yeah, he pulls himself away when his best friend and his brother, like, just get shot, and then it's all of a sudden it's like, yeah, well, I'm not going to help you try to find the killer. So that to me did feel a little bit weird that, like, the person that stepped up at that time was Rita, who wanted to go and get this person instead. But look, I get the feeling that it wasn't lazy writing because of how the rest of the film was written. I get the feeling that the writers wanted to try and make a point with that somehow. Like, I'm just not 100% sure what point they were trying to make. The other new characters, though, they didn't kind of annoy me as much as what some new characters do in a reboot. The only thing I kind of didn't really like was that I felt at times that some of those characters were too much the brunt of the laughs. Like, it felt like they were there for comic relief. And I know when you look back at, like, the original Bad Boys, like the bellhop kind of guy at the apartment building who, like, went on to be in Becca, he was kind of used that way, but he wasn't in very many scenes, so it wasn't so obvious. Whereas in this one, it felt like Happy Anderson's character of Jenkins was being used as comic relief because, hey, he's a big muscular guy, but he only does tech. And likewise with Dawn Alexander Ludwig's character, how it was kind of, no, I think I've got that wrong. Rafe, Charles Melton's character, it was like, oh, well, he's comedic relief because he's so much like Mike that Mike can't stand him. Whereas the tough people of this group were Kelly, Vanessa Hudgens' character, and Rita. It just, I don't know, it felt a little bit too forced that those two guys were there for comedic relief when the first two movies had that little bit of comedy in there, normally as a result of Marcus being scared of something, or if you think back to the original two, think of like how Marcus used to react whenever he was around a dead body. Whereas it just felt like too convenient about, oh, let's just bring these two guys in and make them the comedic relief. I actually think it would have been better if the character of Rafe had actually been more an aggressor rather than comedic relief. Like, him and Mike just don't get on. They are very similar, and that's the reason why they don't get on. Like, I'm kind of like think back to when they first brought The Rock into the Fast and Furious, and him and Dom clashed. Not only because, like, he was a cop that was after them, but they just kept on, like, coming to blows because they were too similar. I think I would have actually liked to have seen that element brought in rather than the, hey, let's laugh at these two guys because they're there for comedic relief. It just felt a little bit too forced, which, look, it's a little thing to complain about because I did absolutely love this film.
Yeah, I mean, with the character of Rita, I was thinking, when we first started watching the movie, I thought that was supposed to be the same character. I think it was Sid. I can't remember. It was the same character that Gabrielle Union had played in the second movie, who was Marcus's sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's who I thought that character was supposed to be. I thought, what, had they just recast it with another actress? And because she was playing the same kind of person, I could see that maybe in an earlier script it was supposed to be the same person.
Yeah.
They do reference they do reference later in the movie about Mike breaking up with Marcus's sister, and as you say, it's been 17 years, so I guess something like that could have happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that's who it was supposed to be, and then no, it was just kind of a new character that she was the one that he let get away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying about when the way that Marcus